Hello. Today I would like to talk about habits and health. This is a subject that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and experiencing the ramifications of my own life. And I think actually we all do. Um, we all operate on habits, unconscious habits that allow us to brush our teeth every morning, drive a car, speak a language. But in the context of health, we are most interested in good versus bad habits. So basically 4 points that I'd like to talk about. And the first is, what is this concept of good versus bad habits? Basically, it's a matter of perspective. So what is good or bad really depends on context. So it depends on the culture that you live in, it depends on the information that you have, and it depends on the individual's situation. So, for instance, in our culture, it's considered all right to spit off the sidewalk. In Singapore, they'll arrest you. So that's one obvious difference. It used to be that we had less information and people considered cigarette smoking to be good for the health. 150 years ago, it wasn't considered to be a negative habit. Now we have a lot more information. Also, probably the products that we smoke are less helpful or more insidious in their actions, and now it's considered to be a bad habit. And as far as the individual, what some people can tolerate, just their constitution, for instance, drinking alcohol. Some people can drink some alcohol every day and have really no bad effects, even a little benefit sometimes. A glass of red wine a night, for instance, is good for some people's blood circulation. But for other people, it's not good at all, and they need to avoid alcohol completely. So it really does depend. In the context of traditional Chinese medicine, health is defined essentially as balanced circulation. So what we want to be healthy is to have movement, and that movement that is in correspondence to the seasons and the cycles of the day and the night, and within the body, the different movements of the organs, systems, the blood, the qi, the lymph, the cerebrospinal fluid, which is something that we deal with in craniosacral therapy quite a bit, all needs to circulate. And but it needs to do it in a balanced way so that it's not, we don't have too much rising and not enough sinking, or too much opening and not enough closing. In the sense of, for instance, in the cranial movement, we see a movement that comes out and then a movement that comes back in. And so if the movement comes out and then doesn't come back in very well, that tells us something. So we're not going to get into diagnosis here today, but just as way of an example there. So bad habits from the perspective of health, from this perspective of health, of balanced circulation, bad habits impede balance or impede circulation, or both. And so if we're talking about defining a bad habit, we have to look within the context, within the information we have, within this individual. Is it impeding, as far as a unhealthy habit, is it impeding balance and circulation? So the second thing I wanted to talk about is that habits are conditioned. Habits are activities that have been, you could say in one sense, they've been programmed, but it's not that they've been programmed by a programmer per se. I mean, you can believe that if that helps you, but they've been conditioned through repetition, through cyclic activities. They are not you. So you are not your habits. This is actually really important, and it's where we can start to get freedom, is to recognize this. If we don't recognize this, then it will be very difficult, if not impossible, to change our habits that we want to change. So what you are is ultimately unconditioned by phenomena, by things that happen. Really, I mean, your awareness or spirit or the awareness of this talk. That's if you keep looking and looking deeper and deeper, that's where you end up as far as looking to find out who you are. To live from that moment by moment, now that's a bit more of a challenge, but to at least accept this intellectually, then we can move on and discuss how we might be able to change some negative habits, some bad habits. But let me just make it clear here, when we realize that we are not our habits, that we are unconditioned by them ultimately, that this conditioned phenomena is arising, there's no guilt required in order to change the habits. See, if we indulge in guilt, then we're indulging in a story of what I did in the past and so forth. Really, that's not that useful. It's actually counterproductive because the time to change habits is now, not in the past. What you can do is learn from the past and go, oh, well, that didn't work out so well. Maybe I'll try it differently this time. Then you'll run into the habit energy itself, which, even though you say to yourself, I'm going to do it differently this time, it keeps doing the same thing over and over. So we'll talk about that. So unless you're attached to the activity, the habit, the negative habit, that you can't be conditioned by them. As soon as you become attached to the habit pattern, let's say you're a cigarette smoker and you identify with the cigarettes as a cigarette smoker, but then you start having all these health issues, well, you're internally conflicted. You're going to be suffering from that attachment. So that's usually where people end up when they want to change habits, is some sort of internal conflict. They haven't yet been able to get the space to detach from identification with a habit, yet they know that they want to change. So it can be a very difficult situation. So the third thing, and the main point here, is how do we overcome bad habits? The third point. How do we do this? So in my experience, again, this is my experience, and I'm by all means not the expert that I wish I was, but the first part is we need to find a way to release the attachment to the habit. We need to find that space to release attachment. So not just to the habit, though, but more importantly, to the underlying emotional or psychological or energetic pattern that is sort of giving rise to the habit. So the habit is happening in consciousness or happening in space and time, but underlying it there is something deeper, at least in my experience, and I think bears it out in the medicine that I study and practice. And in order to find that, we need, in order rather to change the habit, we really need to become aware of this. So what is underlying is the issue of basically the practice of trying to overcome habits. And we see this because if we just try to fight the habit itself, we try to just resist the habit, usually, unless it's not a very big, strong habit, doesn't have a lot of this energetic underlayment, then when we fight it, we just kind of perpetuate the pattern. The same way that guilt perpetuates the pattern. So to release attachment, we have to uncover this underlying energetic pattern, and there's always resistance there. There's resistance on a lot of levels. Sometimes just to seeing the pattern itself, there can be quite a lot of resistance. So this underlying resistance is really the hidden motive for the attachment to the habit. And like I said, it can be really difficult to just even see this resistance. There's often a lot of fear involved. It can be very frightening. It can be scary to go underneath the conscious pattern and see what is this feeling underneath the pattern that is making me act this way, that's driving this action that is arising. Again, if we can step back and say this action is arising, it's not necessarily something I'm doing because by golly I can't stop it, so therefore it must not be my activity, right? It's arising within my awareness. Now that's not to put the blame on somebody else. It's still our responsibility to change the pattern. Nobody else can, but to realize that we're powerless to fight it. We need to find out how to essentially subvert it from inside out. So why is it frightening? Well, we've resisted it for so long. It's a habit. It's been happening for a long period of time. And the resistance really protects us in some way. Often the habit pattern was formed in a different context in our life, a different time in our life, when it served a role. It was necessary in some way. It formed a defense mechanism against some perceived injury or real injury. There's really no difference psychologically. So the main teaching here, the main point when you're trying to uncover this resistance is do not fear the fear. I believe it was a quote from our former president, JFK. The only thing we can, what is it? The worst thing to fear is fear itself, or something like that. Anyway, don't fear the fear, because the fear itself is just energy in the body, and it can be liberated, and it will move through. It's an emotion, just like all emotions. They move through, they'll change. So being present with the fear is actually a good sign when you're dealing with trauma and patterns and stuff, if you can be with it. If it overwhelms you, obviously that you're maybe not ready to go that far into this pattern. And also, as far as releasing attachment, the most important thing that we can do in order to uncover the resistance is to cultivate stillness. So it's within the context of stillness of mind, stillness of heart, very often which require often stillness of body as well. We can find the space to really allow the resistance to rise up into our awareness. Stillness also, I would say, is pretty much synonymous with relaxation. There's a slight difference there, but when we really relax our mind, relax our heart, relax our body, allow attention to just settle into the present moment without becoming distracted, that's the difficult part. That makes it a little different than just relaxation, because often people relax and they pass out. We want to relax and be present. Then we can start to see things in our experience that we were not able to see before, that were hidden from us. So deep relaxation with attention can be cultivated. This is basically the practice of meditation. Meditation can be done in different ways, but the most powerful way is to actually sit cross-legged or in a chair, and there's a lot of different instructions that can be given. It's just many different avenues that you can proceed. But if you have practice, I suggest employing it in the context of trying to change habits. If you don't have practice, you can message me and I'll talk to you a little bit more personally. We can see what might work for you. And finally, craniosacral therapy, cranial work, and acupuncture can help. And it can help in three big ways. The first way is it promotes stillness. So people come into my office, they get on the table. Some people, they don't have a practice. They don't have a meditation practice. And they'll tell me, this is the only time in my life that I just don't do anything. Now, I don't recommend that. I recommend that you go, don't do things in other contexts besides on my table. But if this is the only time that you can actually find the time to do it, then it's helpful. It is. People do get useful stillness time out of it. It can also serve as a touchstone if you do enter into deeper states. And I've had this experience before, getting cranial work and going into deeper states and kind of resonating with my own personal meditation practice. And it can be a useful touchstone for re-entering states of body-mind stillness in your own practice. Also, and probably a little bit more pertinent, is that with a skilled acupuncturist, skilled craniosacral practitioner, we can localize areas or issues in the body, in the mind, that require a little bit more attention. So we can help people find the resistance that they might not otherwise have located, often because of the defense mechanisms. It's we're trying to ignore it in some way, subconsciously or unconsciously or habitually, really. There's really no such thing as unconscious. There's just deeper layers of consciousness. So we can help on the process, on the journey to self-discovery. Now, we can't do it for the client. The client has to want to change, want to find these things out, want to go and deal with them. But it can be useful to help on that process. For some people, for a lot of people. And finally, cranial work and acupuncture help promote balanced circulation. So they help promote health. They help promote positive habits. So this is huge because a lot of what's going on is negative cycles that have gotten imbalanced but are continuing to go to try to balance out in different ways. And so by promoting balanced circulation, very often we can kind of pull the rug out from underneath the negative habits, and that can be very useful. So those three ways, acupuncture, promoting and cranial work, promoting stillness, helping find restrictions, and promoting balanced circulation. So finally, I hope this has been useful, but I just want to finish with change is always possible. You might feel that the habit that you're thinking about here, listening to this talk, is not going to ever change, but change is always possible. In fact, change is inevitable. And, you know, we know that, but we don't want to think about the big change that's inevitable necessarily. We want to just change these little habits and be on with our current life. Still, what I would say is that patterns that promote unhappiness will inevitably resolve. Have faith. They will eventually. Now, it might take a long time. You know, as the Buddhists say, it might take kalpas, many, many kalpas, which are tens of millions of years cycles or something like that. But we can speed the process up. We can make it happen instantaneously, actually. It's possible. By simply allowing awareness of our unhappiness. So what we want to do is to really be present with our own sense of dissatisfaction. And that will help us find out where we're resisting and move forward and change these habits. So I hope this was useful, and until next time, peace be with you.